All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. This is, as you know, a webinar designed to officially launch the two global studies, Global Cocoa Market Study and Dominican Republic Supply Case Study that were conducted by Gaia Cacao. These are studies funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, coordinated by the International Executive Service Organization, and advised by our team at the Fine Cacao and Chocolate Institute. I am Carla Martin, and I will be the moderator of this session. We have a jam-packed 60 minutes for all of you. We will stick very strictly to our schedule, and we invite you throughout to use down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, if you follow my pointer finger, the Q&A button. This stands for questions and answers in order to ask questions. We invite you to ask rigorous questions that have to do with the study itself. You will also see in our chat a variety of different links that we're providing to support you in finding what you need for today. Our presentations will take place in English. These studies are a free and open access and available for download at the links in the chat. They are also in English. And this entire live stream webinar is also being streamed via Facebook, but by Cacao Mobile, our partners for this webinar. We're very excited to have you here with us all. And I would like to now turn it over to my colleague, Anya Madalinska from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Foreign Agricultural Service, to briefly introduce USDA and their role in these studies. Anya, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today to hear the long-awaited launch of this ambitious effort. My name is Anya Madalinska, and I represent the Food for Progress International Food Assistance Program at USDA. Food for Progress is a program started originally by the Farm Bill by Congress in 1985. And in its almost 3 decades of operations, the program has made various investments in improving agricultural value chains throughout the world. Our imprint in cacao has been significant. Over the past decade, we've funded more than $180 million in programming, which contains work in cacao in countries all across the world from Ecuador to Ghana. Reflecting on our portfolio of work, we found an untapped opportunity to bridge the gap between farmer investment decisions in producing countries and what is happening in international global markets and the future projections. What happens on a farm in Ecuador or Ghana will be impacted by what happens in global markets. Therefore, in order to harness this opportunity and to mitigate risks, farmers should have access to this information. We believe that this information should be accessible to cacao actors who depend on it. Therefore, it is for this reason that IESC took on this challenge. They coordinated a participatory effort that was inclusive to engage researchers and to produce information that would be free of cost and available to everybody, from including all of our Food for Progress cacao beneficiaries, but also anyone who around the world who could benefit. And so I want to extend a thank you to everybody who took part, and I'm looking very much forward to hearing the presentation.
Thank you so much, Anya, and we're appreciative of your introduction. As I hope is becoming clear, this has been a collaborative effort that has involved dozens of people. To give you some context, we began this study or the process of leading into this study last year before a COVID-19 vaccine had been released. During the time in which the study has been completed, the vaccine has been released. The Delta variant has developed, the Omicron variant has developed, booster shots have been released. We have team members who have been impacted by this pandemic, who are currently facing the disease itself. This has been a study conducted in very different conditions than many that might have been conducted in the past. And we've been very fortunate to have partnered with the International Executive Service Corps, IESC, who has kindly and graciously coordinated and stewarded this study to its completion. I would like to invite Chad Ford, please, to introduce IESC and your work.
Thank you, Carla. Good morning. Good afternoon and good evening. What a great turnout. I think we're above 100 participants so far, and that's very exciting for us for this event. We at ISC are very pleased to share these two USDA-funded reports, which provide comprehensive overviews of the cocoa chocolate market and its many products, for example, the derivatives, value addition opportunities, and the respective price points in market opportunities. It is a snapshot in time, albeit a panoramic snapshot, given the depth and breadth of it. And we wanted to get that information out. We want it to be used. We hope these reports contribute to ongoing and future development projects seeking to empower stakeholders throughout the value chain with critical market data and insights to inform their business decisions, their collaboration among each other, and the policymakers that report back to them in these countries as they consider priorities in rural development. We hope those of you in here that see the value to this information, share it as you see fit, bring parts of it into your trainings that you can use on your projects, use the Dominican Republic country report as a template, make it better, make it bigger, use it as widely as you can. I would like to thank USDA for their engagement and feedback throughout this whole process. I would also like to thank FCCI for leading this webinar with your network and your outreach, Carla and Yoame specifically for your critical and valuable inputs throughout this whole process. And of course, the team from Gaia, which I cannot mention each one by name because it is too large, for your months of efforts on these studies. Finally, many of you in this webinar also served as guidance to the terms of reference. Some of you were key informants during this process, and some even served as peer reviewers, outside advisories during the development of this study. Thank you for that investment of your time, which greatly contributed to the findings and the analysis put into these studies. Back to you, Carla.
Thank you so much, Chad. Again, what I hope you're hearing is how many different hands have been part of this project. This is a multi-continent, multi-stakeholder project that has involved dozens of different people working at different stages over time. There are too many people, in fact, for us to name and to express our gratitude to that have made this study possible. As I said, I'm Carla Martin. I'm the Executive Director of the Fine Cacao and Chocolate Institute with my colleague Jaume Martorell-Mir. I advised on this study. A number of our different team members also played a role in making sure that we were supporting a hybrid academic and industry approach to studying both the global market for cacao and chocolate and derivatives and the Dominican Republic case study supply chain. All of this took place over nearly a year. Gaia Cacao will share with you the 6 months in which they were involved in this study. Actually, if we really add it all up, it's more like 9 months. It's basically like birthing a child. The amount of work that they have put into this has been enormous. And of course, it has taken place under difficult conditions in many ways. Our role at FCCI has been to provide rigorous academic advising support, as well as market expertise, to make sure that what comes out of this study is factual and rigorous in its approach. And what I'd like to briefly address before we jump into the meat of these studies themselves is what a market study is and what it is not. When it comes to what a market study is not, the first thing it is not is marketing. Marketing is something that is designed to sell products, to make consumers desire those products, and more. This study does not aim to do that. In fact, it aims to provide critical information so that people who would like to do marketing can use the facts and the data presented to design those plans themselves. In addition, market studies are about markets. Markets are not people. They do not solve people problems. So if you approach this study looking for spiritual guidance, for evidence of your lifestyle being the right lifestyle, for an approach to trying to find how you fit in the world, where your company should go, etc., you will be disappointed because philosophically, this study looks at the market only. It is focused on facts, data, and critical information that can support decision-making about the market. Ultimately, that can only be done by people. And so we hope that people will deeply engage with these facts and this data in order to bring it to life. And then finally, following on what Chad said, a market study is a snapshot in time. It is not something that can live and breathe. It can be updated, but it necessarily includes some information and does not include others. It necessarily is bounded within a time frame and will change over time. So if you have questions about what decisions were made, who was interviewed and why, what was cited and why, these are all important, but necessarily bounded by the constraints of the study itself. We feel extremely proud of the work that has been done. We think that it stands on its own and that it speaks for itself. And we hope that you will deeply and rigorously engage with the information that is presented there and bring it to life yourselves. All right, I'd like to turn this over to my colleague, Mariana de la Rosa, who is going to join us by answering the question, what is a market study for? What does it cover? And who is it for? Mariana, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Carla, USDA, ISC team, and all of our colleagues out there who are behind the screen and kindly joined this, this launch that is extremely excited for us. So basically, who is it for? Like Anya said at the beginning, it is for, this market study is meant to be for everybody, for producers organizations, for processors, for exporters, for government organizations, for donors, and for everybody involved in the cocoa value chain. What we hope is to provide a better understanding of the sector dynamics, more adequate prioritization of actions and interventions. So in a nutshell, it is for all of us involved in the chain. What does it cover? I think Chad made a great overview, but it's basically an overview of the industry, global dynamics, market trends, supply and demand, information on prices. This is an exciting chapter, information on sustainability, legal requirements, competitor analysis, and it's filled with information. And what we brought today is a glimpse of what can you out there as a reader expect in each of the chapters that we have right in this 6-month period of research. Yeah.
And now we turn it over to our colleague, Marika van Zandvoort. And please, Marika, go ahead and take us through who Gaia Cacao is and what the study is.
Okay, thank you, Carla. Thank you, everybody. So Gaia Cacao is a company based in Amsterdam, and we are specialized in cacao and cacao products. I see Marianne, you're sharing. Yeah. Okay. Yes, here we are. So Gaia Cacao is a company based in Amsterdam, specialized in cacao and cacao products, derivatives. We founded the company in 2019. Myself, Marika, and Mariana de la Rosa are the founders. And the aim of our business is to grow the market for good cacao. And we do this in all kinds of projects, research projects such as this one. And we work together with governments, private companies, NGOs, and more. At the beginning of this year, we were excited to see that this project, the tender project, was set out, and we decided to apply for it. We're super proud to have been selected to be the partners to conduct this very condensed, rich research project. We've been working together in a group of consultants. We were 5 core team members, and I'm going to introduce everybody later on as well. And we're working with a group of other people who have supported us throughout these past 6 months. Yeah, maybe the agenda, you can go one back first. Yes, so Gaia Cacao, that's already been mentioned. I'm going to take you through the project team who've been working on this, and then we're going to start talking about the global cocoa market study. And we're not going to go in depth on every little thing because it's just too much, but we're just going to highlight a couple of things that you can find per chapter in the report. So we're going to talk about the purpose, the methodology, and the content per chapter. And then we go over to the Dominican Republic case study. where the same thing, we'll go into the purpose and we'll go into the content and all the exciting things that you can find per chapter. And then in the end, there's a bit of time for questions. Okay, so yeah, we have been working together with several researchers, and I'm going to introduce the core team, which we call the Gaia Netherlands team, or the GNT. Mariana de la Rosa, my colleague, my partner, co-founder of Gaia Cacao, she was the team leader of this project. She has more than 12 years experience working in cocoa and chocolate, and she has actually started her career working for Nestle. Her role as a project leader was to really communicate about, to all the stakeholders involved about the activities that were taking place, the deadlines, deliverables, so a super important role in the project. Then myself, Marika van Sandvoort, co-founder also of Gaia Cacao. I have a background in human rights, and I've been working in the cocoa sector for almost 9 years, mainly working as a consultant for the industry, training companies, supporting them with strategy and setting up projects. My role in this project was as an industry specialist and as a coordinator. Then there's Jeroen Kruft, is the founder of Amigos International. It's a consultancy company, and the company often participates in studies on coffee and cocoa. So you will see his name often in CBI studies, for example. His extensive research experience, market research experience, and his sustainability-minded approach really made him an excellent industry specialist in the project. We have Gustavo Ferro, who's not here live with us today, but he will be joining us nevertheless. He's an independent consultant, and his name also often comes up when you type in cocoa, and especially when you're on the CBI website, because he's a lead researcher on the coffee and the cocoa projects for CBI. And his market intelligence skills and his strategy thinking really made him the best marketing specialist that we could wish for. And him and Mariana traveled to the Dominican Republic to do research there a couple of months ago. Katy Sanchez Amiquiero is a PhD candidate at Wageningen University, and the Wageningen University is one of the leading food universities in the world. She was researching on Peruvian cocoa value chains and has a lot of experience in quantitative research and data analysis, which really helped us as she was our statistical validator in the project. Then last of this group here is Dr. Hilde Toby. She is a renowned researcher and a lecturer at the University of Wageningen. She wrote more than 100 papers and articles on methodology. So she was the right person to guide us through a very robust methodology and statistical approach. Then we also have an extended team that are also very important to us. The first one, Omar Caraballo, who is from the Dominican Republic, and he was the country lead for the study that we did in the DR. He supported us with all kinds of logistics, setting up interviews and joining us for interviews. So thank you to Omar. Then there's Ana Tavares, who also is from the DR, and she helped us also setting up interviews and logistics as well. And Jose Antonio Lara is a data analyst working for Gaia Cacao, and he played an important role to help us understand all the data coming back and also translating this into beautiful graphs that you will see in the report. Luisa Ticona and Maricielo Tokunaga, both are from Peru. Both have been a great help to our project. They helped us with data collection and supporting us during the many interviews that we did. And then we have Amable Espina, who works for Gaia Cacao, supporting us on project management activities throughout the project. Thank you.
Now, just going deep into the global cocoa market study, here is the report, and basically where we centralize existing studies, knowledge, and data. Some of you in the audience out there will see familiar graphs and expert quotes that you will read throughout. We have triangulated all the information that we've gathered in order to be able to build this global cocoa market study. Now, in terms of the methodology we used, For this study, we had in place an extensive literature review where we analyzed over 430 papers, articles, and publications. The second tool we had in place was semi-structured interviews. We managed to run 62 semi-structured interviews across all actors in the value chain for this research. I know most of you are in the audience today, so I want to take the opportunity to thank you for contributing for this research. Now, for both tools, we designed comprehensive spreadsheets so that we can gather all this relevant information from each document and from each interview so that it was captured and analyzed accordingly. Now, just going deep into the report, what you will find in the first chapter is we looked at the industry background and the historical overview. And we did this through a timeline. You can see it here, where we highlighted the main historical events that shaped the cocoa sector. So political struggles, corporate decisions, sustainability initiative, you can also find on this graph. In this chapter, you will also come across industry definitions, so such as product types, or the different segments that we have established in the cocoa sector based on the literature we had as a base.
In the second chapter, which is about global market trends and requirements, aims to provide an overview of the evolution of the cocoa supply and demand at global, regional, and local level. So this chapter provides a very rich quantitative information on how the global, regional, and local supply of cocoa beans and derivatives have evolved in the last decades. The first figure on the upper left shows the evolution of the global cocoa production by region in the last 58 years, where the Africa region shows an important growth in the last decades. On the demand side, this chapter also provides information on the global demand by industry and product, which is about cocoa beans and derivatives. The second figure on the upper right shows the evolution of cocoa beans imports, both in volume and value. This chapter also provides a very rich analysis of the balance between supply and demand. The reader can find this projected surplus for 2020. The figure on the lower left side can be found in the study and shows the surplus and deficit of cocoa beans at global level. The market study also contains information on the demand by region. The figure on the lower right side shows these regional cocoa grindings from 2003 till 2020. This chapter also explores how local markets are important in 3 countries. Brazil, Colombia, and Indonesia were selected for this. And also we analyze how the trade flows between 3 producing countries and its neighbor countries can create possible synergies. The end of this chapter provides a very rich overview of the impact of COVID-19 on the cocoa industry. The global dynamics. The market study provides a map for the global cocoa value chain, which is this slide in the left side. This is the result of the value chain mapping that we developed. Core actors for each stage of the global value chain were identified. We also provide a very detailed description, like estimated number of factors, examples of companies, their main role and activities, and their requirements in terms of annual volume, frequency of orders, which quality they require, certification, etc. And in the lower side, also the market study contains this information, this table, which is about the European and USA legal requirements for cocoa and cocoa products.
The next chapter is about pricing. So there's a lot of factors involved in what drives the prices of cacao. Supply and demand is by far still the biggest factor, but what drives supply and demand? We look into that very deeply. We do an analysis of stock to grind ratios, but we also try to really, in layman's terms, explain what hedging is and how it can be used and where to be careful. Country differentials are important, as you can see in graphs that are being used throughout the report, but also certification and quality may influence price setting. Investments in the market, looking at also managed money and even speculation, also drive some prices. And to what extent? We look into that in a critical way. And based on the research and our interviews, we come to interesting conclusions. There's a lot of liquidity in the market that we look at. Is that important? Computerized trading is something of the last years. Tariffs, trade agreements, taxes are being discussed, and also how crises could possibly affect prices. Now, if we look at the stock market, the big question always is why this volatility? Does it go up and down, these prices? When we talk to farmers worldwide, it's always a big headache, and also, of course, for traders and manufacturers. So we look into the reasons behind that. We look at elasticity. In fact, we come to the conclusion that cocoa is not really all that inelastic, or not that elastic. It's actually quite inelastic. And especially also looking at the volatility, it's not that bad in comparison to other commodities. Anyways, there's a profound analysis of that. And of course, this has everything to do with the future exchanges in New York and London. We get into that as well, try to explain it as best as we can. Farm gate prices then, how are farmers affected by the world market prices? How are they affected by their economy, which sometimes is regulated by their government, takes a huge chunk of tax, perhaps being reinvested, but how does that compare to liberalized cocoa economies where usually the farm gate price is higher, but maybe the government is much less involved? How do farm gate prices compare between conventional cacao and certified cacao or quality cacao? And how could you actually increase farm gate prices? We look at that as well, based on all of the literature available and our interviews that we did. Now, also looking at market concentration, this is an important part. And in fact, the Dutch Parliament once even asked for a separate study to be conducted, looking at why is market concentration really distorting things, and does it drive poverty? And we also come to interesting conclusions related to that. There is no time to get into that now, but I do want to mention that we also look at living income reference prices, and that is everything to do with how a living income, a good price could be attained for farmers. That in relationship to the living income differential, the LID, we look at that as well in great detail, the effects of that. Price structures, payment conditions, purchasing contracts. You need to know what is in a contract if you're in the cocoa industry. So you look at the CMAA, the FCC, but also ISO functions and their standards and what contracts look like. And finally, we look at how perhaps a product such as a chocolate bar is built up. How is the cost distribution being developed? And there is a body of literature on that as well. We pulled all of that together and we try to analyze that and come to some conclusions on that as well.
Yes, so this chapter that we wrote is about the trends that we have seen in the market. So during our many interviews that we did, we asked the interviewees what they have seen, of course, what they've witnessed over the past years and what they foresee happening in the future. And based on these interviews, and we triangulated that with data that we saw coming from the reports that we made, we established several trends, big trends, and we explained them in this chapter. The first trend is on cocoa production reaching new records, sustainability becoming mainstream, expansion of multinationals, the behavior of consumer that is changing, the health and wellness factor and how that drives chocolate consumption, and the growth of the specialty market. So these trends are very well explained in this chapter, and on each of the trends we also mention some key insights, and at the last part of this chapter is describing which aspects are either growing the cocoa and chocolate sector or constraining it.
In order to assess the key challenges that must be overcome in the cocoa industry and how to take advantage of business opportunities, this market report contains a SWOT analysis, which is an analytical instrument used to identify significant internal and external elements within any business. So we developed a SWOT analysis for conventional cocoa producers, bulk cocoa producers, or organic cocoa producers, and craft chocolate makers. The analysis of competition was done using Michael Porter's 5 forces model, which is a very useful framework to assess the degree of competition in any industry. So we assessed these 5 forces that the model includes, and the result of this analysis is in the market study for both bulk cocoa beans and organic cocoa beans producers.
We went to great length to also give a comprehensive overview of sustainability issues in the cocoa sector. Here we have to look at obviously definitions of sustainability, but also how do you manage risks? Who are the actors in the particular initiatives that are being addressed right now, that are being taken, and who in the end is responsible? Is it the consumer? Is it the trader? Is it the farmers? Is it the multinationals? We look at that in a critical way. We also look at living income. I mentioned already the LID, the living income differential, which was, many of you will know what I'm talking about. We really analyze that and look at the consequences of that, and cartel forming in general, if that could be policy that could increase living income, or if you have to look at other ways. Child labor, youth, gender, all of these issues are being discussed, and we're looking at various initiatives being taken worldwide, as well as ecological aspects such as deforestation. Granted, cocoa is not only accounts for 2% of the agricultural deforestation, but still it's something worth to look at. We do also look at agroforestry, the relation of yield and price versus deforestation. We look at various examples of deforestation in various cocoa producing countries, and obviously the initiatives that are being taken by cocoa companies, FBOs, which are farmer-based organizations, but also by companies. So if we look at ecological aspects, we cannot avoid the issue of climate change. To the right, you see the map. Below is 2050, where you can see it's a little hotter then. So what are you going to do to mitigate that? What are the initiatives currently being taken by the North and the South in terms of climate change? But also we look at soil health. We look at interesting things that could mitigate climate change, but also increase productivity, and that could increase product quality at the farm level. So we go into depth there in including a discussion of a new certification which goes beyond organic, which is called regenerative agricultural certification. Then we have on sustainability also certification. For example, you can see to the left how much of the certified product is actually being sold with that certificate. You can see that there's still a big gap there, but can that be avoided? How about government regulation on human rights? How about sustainability of companies? There are many initiatives being launched currently by small but also large companies, but we look at them very critically. As you can see in this matrix that we've developed, we look at 10 major companies, and that's the next slide, please, where we would have 10 companies being measured against a variety of factors, KPIs that include sustainability aspects such as traceability, child labor, and monitoring and remediation systems, or even child labor awareness or deforestation awareness, living income that is achieved, or even goals that these companies will set. So we've tried to really look at that. This might need more work. That could be a scope for next studies by an organization to compare all these companies. In the end, we do make some conclusions. We look at, for example, price formation, where we feel that perhaps there is limited influence of speculation and machine trading, and price is still mostly supply and demand. Obviously, it's a very complex scheme, but read the report for that and you get all the nuances, hopefully. We look at yield. We look at crop dependence. We feel that that may be driving poverty more than market concentration, perhaps, and that's going already a little bit toward the recommendations. Some farmers should move out of the sector, out of agriculture, and move into other sectors when you have too little land to cultivate your products on. We look at the multinationals. We look at sustainability, health, and specialty segment driving the market. We also look at what drives sustainability. Could it be civil society, more and more taking companies and governments to court? We also conclude that Marieke mentioned it already, we see sustainability being mainstreamed by larger companies. We see it more and more in supermarkets and with the major processors. And in the end, we also have some conclusions on the importance of good policy. In the end, the recommendations are many. They deal with multiple issues that I mentioned before. Farmer income, where you could say perhaps declare forests off limits, so you would have limited land that would create a better price. This is also supported by literature, and there would also have the win-win situation of saving some of our last forests. We have recommendations on human rights, deforestation, on youth, on the empowerment of producer country governments, where judicial processes are very important, and how to make sustainable intervention. And that would be the last point I'd like to make here. We feel that it's very important that donors have an exit strategy. Otherwise, too many interventions that we've seen in the literature and also from our experience don't actually make a lasting impact if you don't know how to pull out in a sustainable way. I'll leave it at that, and back to the moderators.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. Now, if you can imagine, the team from Gaia Cacao began this work in April and completed it in November, meaning that they are more or less elite athletes at the end of a marathon, wrapped in their silver heat-retaining blankets. We do need to congratulate them for completing this enormous amount of work in such a short period of time. Most people were in strong agreement that this was an enormously ambitious project. And so we ask you as readers to keep that in mind as you read. In addition to the global cocoa market study, there is a Dominican Republic supply case study. You may wonder why it is that the Dominican Republic was the subject of this focus. That is because the Exporting Quality Program, funded by USDA and coordinated by IESC, has been taking place. It's just ended in the Dominican Republic after several years. And so this was in many ways a capstone project to conclude that work. In order to show this particular part of the study, a video has been recorded that features our colleagues Mariana de la Rosa of Gaia Cacao and Gustavo Ferro, who was also part of the research team from Gaia. All right, Mariana, please go ahead.
So the next report we would like to take you through and explain every chapter is about the Dominican Republic cocoa supply case study that comes with this project. So the methodology we had in place for this Dominican Republic case study included an extensive literature review. And since this study was conducted in parallel to the global market study, we had the same data collected. So the 430 papers, articles, and publications were also analyzed and contextualized for this report. The next tool we used was related to the in-depth semi-structured interviews. Again, we took the global ones to incorporate into the study, and we included 39 interviews where most of them were conducted during our field trip in the Dominican Republic. We also had the opportunity to conduct 3 focus groups. Each of them had different topics related to the objectives of the project. And we included in these focus groups members of the management of cooperatives, government organizations, technicians and field and extension cocoa technicians, processing companies, exporters, etc. We also had the luxury to have, during our field trip, to organize a producer sector roundtable in Atomayor, one of cocoa producing regions in Dominican Republic, just to gather insights from the producers. And the last data collection tool we used for this project was the producer survey. This was possible for the cooperation and our local and the support of our local team. So the survey was conducted in all of the cocoa regions in the Dominican Republic, in the relevant municipalities, and this survey yielded 172 producers. Another element that we would like to highlight that it's in this report, we call it the voice of the producer, is actual qualitative data that came from the survey and that we incorporated into different chapters as you read along. It was actually a suggestion from one of our advisors Amanda Berlan to put this softer touch to the report.
Now going into the actual content of the report, we started with the Dominican Republic's position in the cocoa industry. And we did this through a timeline where we highlighted the main historical events that impacted and shaped the cocoa sector. And also we provided here in this chapter an analysis of the impact level and the implications to the actual current profile of the sector in the country. We included, of course, events such as when cocoa was introduced into the country, different export development policies, natural disasters, also development plans, and other elements to this timeline. And also important to highlight here is that this chapter brings key terms, industry standards, and common definitions to contextualize the case study. And maybe an interesting thing that compared to the global study is we took some of the industry standards which are very specific and key terms that are very specific to Dominican Republic. Secondly, so in the second chapter, we have the Dominican Republic's cocoa supply analysis, and we did this analysis and a perspective on the evolution and the current position of Dominican Republic in relation to the global cocoa industry. So every time we talk about the local context, we always take it to a higher level and compare it with other supply countries, but also to the market position in different international markets. So we're looking into the evolution of the production, the harvested area and yield, the exports per product category, including conventional certified, but also the Sanchez and the Española, the main destinations for Dominican Republic's exports, both in terms of beans, but also all possible derivatives and finished products that are coming from cocoa. And one important aspect, of course, is certification, production and sales of certified cocoa, the different certifications that are available, organic, fair trade, Rainforest Alliance, and of course, comparing average prices with other producing countries as well, and the fine flavor status and the exports from the Dominican Republic, also in relation to global suppliers. In the third chapter, we look into the value chain. So it's interesting that what Mariana mentioned about the methodology, very powerful methodologies we used, and we could really optimize the results here were inputs from interviews and focus group discussions. We actually mapped out the value chain together with sector stakeholders locally, which allowed us to look into the value chain dynamics and also the interactions amongst the stakeholders. And in this chapter, we describe the each core actor in the Dominican cocoa value chain, both the local actors, but also their relation to international market actors. One very special typology here that you describe is the cocoa producers. This typology, of course, was only possible to be described so much in depth due to, and thanks to the survey that we conducted among all these producers in the target group, in the sample that was used, and different categories, different groups were defined by this survey and were possible to be described in this chapter.
The next chapter we have in the report is about productivity. Now we understand that different factors can have an influence on the productivity. So we took the opportunity of the survey to make interesting correlations. So we started making links based on also literature review, interviews, focus groups that we could take note, adapt, and study. So for instance, things you will find on this chapter is the productivity versus the size of the producer, versus the access to credit, technical assistance, level of education, associativity, for instance. So we would understand whether producers who is associated to a farmer-based organization will have more or less productivity, and all this you can find more details on the chapter. The next one is about the value provided by each of the marketing channels. Now, what Gustavo just mentioned earlier, now that we have defined the value chain or the core of the value chain, we want to understand the value of each of the products as it goes through that chain. So the basis we had for this analysis was well, understanding the value of the cocoa beans per US metric tons for each of the product segment in relation to the world market prices. So then we also had the value in US dollars per ton per cocoa derivative. We also understood the producer cost to enable this profit margin analysis, and this we based it on the literature, but also we had a focus group activity where we could get the producer costs based on the experts on the room to give us a better enlighten us to these actual costs. And the other key piece of information is the FOB prices of the cocoa butter based on the data from the Comisión Nacional de Cacao in the Dominican Republic. Then now that we have set up the basis to do the price structure and the profit margin analysis, one of the things we noticed during the field trip is that producers in the Dominican Republic they select the marketing channel depending on the specific needs, and all these needs we capture in the survey, but we also are reflected and analyzed in the report. So basically a producer can sell to an intermediary, to an association, to a cooperative, or directly to an exporter. And based on all these possible marketing channels is how we estimated the price structure and profit margin. So we had two different scenarios, as you can see there. For example, marketing channel A involved 4 actors. So a producer selling to an intermediary, to a farmer-based organization, exporter, and then the foreign manufacturer. And then you have a shorter chain where a cocoa producer will sell to an exporter and then to the foreign manufacturer. Several considerations and assumptions were made for each of these calculations. And what you will see in the report is that table on the side where you have per channel, per marketing channel selected the different profit margins. And most of these assumptions we use to make all of this calculation, it's basically based in interviews, focus groups, and the data gathered from the survey.
Yeah, and important to mention here is the richness of data that we could get from the National Cocoa Commission. So it's important when conducting such studies that such data are also available for this kind of analysis.
Indeed, it's a luxury, the data that the Commission had gathered. Yeah. The next chapter is about agroforestry systems. What we will see in this chapter is agroforestry benefits, the alternative crops, and the farmer's income. And we also look at income diversification activities. We also understood the different alternative crops that were mentioned during the survey. And one key element that I want to make a few remarks is, or highlight, is the demonstrative plots. So experts in the Dominican Republic, while they were being interviewed, mentioned that the choice of the crops and the species will depend on the geographic location. So although the Dominican Republic is a small country, there are marked climatic regions throughout the territory that are important to consider. And the results of this study are not yet conclusive, but it is for all of the actors who are joining this webinar today to keep an eye on these results and benefit from the science behind this analysis. Next chapter is about sustainability, using as a basis what my colleague Jerun explained earlier from the global. Now we contextualize to the Dominican Republic. So the elements that you will find on this chapter cover are climate change resilience, gender, the living income. In fact, that photo you see there on the slide related to the living income reference price, which is taken from Carla Veldhausen. We did that calculation for the Dominican Republic. So looking forward to hear your feedback. And the other photo there refers to the agroclimatic regions spotted in the country, and how to implement these different the actions that should be implemented to these regions, to different regions.
Now looking into the market opportunities for Dominican Republic, this already is a more conclusive chapter. We take different lessons from the statistics and also from the market opportunities that have been identified throughout also the global study. We do an analysis of the opportunities for Dominican Republic in terms of the expansion into high value markets for cocoa beans, but also looking into derivatives the potential growth in different product segments, but also different market segments internationally. And for that, of course, we use the statistics provided, but also qualitative analysis based on the global study, but also our knowledge on market developments. We use some tools such as the ITC export potential tool to make this analysis a little bit easier, a little bit more procedural as well. Another important point that we discuss here is the integration of the new cocoa producing regions within Dominican Republic, meaning how to integrate these producers into the mainstream channels for the Dominican Republic cocoa industry. And of course, a very interesting discussion around ecotourism and agrotourism as an experience that can be integrated into the cocoa industry as well.
In fact, as we were leaving the country, we were just witnessed the opening of the visitor center of Cortés Hermanos, which is an important cocoa manufacturer in the Dominican Republic. So we do see already the country moving towards this opportunity.
And now to finalize the recommendations and potential investments that we have identified, you can see an example here of how we have described this chapter. You see that the voice of the producer is also appearing in this chapter, meaning that throughout the study, we try to integrate the voice of the producer as well. Some areas of recommendations and potential interventions that we have described are also highlighted here in terms of productivity, cultivation systems and crop diversification, local value addition and marketing, which Mariana mentioned previously also is part of this local market development and integration into tourism, for example, and the consciousness, the awareness of the local population towards higher value products, for example, climate change resilience, the development of human resources that actually allow for the advancement of the industry, the cacao as an industry, associativity to strengthen the sector. We know that Dominican Republic has high associativity, but we also have described potential investments to enhance associativity, youth participation in agricultural programs, including in the cocoa sector, and also an approach towards the specialty segment. And last but not least, how to handle information. And in this case, we have described how to keep an up-to-date agricultural census that will allow to have information for very exact interventions in the future in the sector.
Yeah, and just as Gustavo said before, one of the things we noticed by taking the opportunity to observe during our field trip is the need of the human resources, so highly skilled individuals in the cocoa industry to further develop it. And last thing we wanted to share with all of you in the audience today is that based on this study, we built up a country template which has the specific objective to serve as a guidance, and that captures everything we did to conduct this research. So it has two parts, one that is related to the process, and the other one is related specifically to the content, using as a basis the global cocoa market study we also did. So we provide, for example, a detailed description on how to carry out this research in a cocoa specific region or cocoa specific country. It includes tools, tips for it to develop each of the chapters. So or where to find relevant information, what data collections tools come in handy to answer each of these research questions, etc. You can find in this country template, which will be made also available by the team of IESE. I think I'll now hand over to my colleague to finish up this webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much to Mariana and to Gustavo for that. For those of you who are following along, I hope it's clear how intensely detailed this work is. And as a professor, I would be remiss in my work if I did not suggest that good writing benefits from good readers. So what I can recommend as part of the team that has read many drafts of this study and worked with it for a period of months what we strongly suggest, so as to avoid feeling overwhelmed by the details or intimidated by the level of rigor that has been applied here, that you spend time getting to know the table of contents of each study, examining the methodology, and then determining within each study what section would be of the biggest benefit to the questions that you seek to answer. The real challenge that exists with something like this is that this is an enormous amount of information that has been very thoughtfully and carefully crafted and presented. It therefore needs readers that will engage with it at the same level. And that means taking the time to get to know the documents and to seek out different questions that you might have answers to. The studies themselves will not be able always to exactly answer your questions, but they will be able to provide you with accurate data and with facts carefully considered that can provide you with the critical information that you need to make decisions. And our hope that this is that these studies will be used by individuals, by organizations, and we could even potentially think about using them in society at large as a way to address many of the issues that we see in the cocoa and chocolate value chain. Some important things to underline as we conclude are that market studies themselves remain about markets. So the types of questions that you can ask of this must be linked with cocoa and chocolate markets, and they must also therefore inform your answers in cocoa and chocolate markets. But of course, these markets never exist in a vacuum. And one of the things that repeatedly comes up throughout the studies is that the very serious social issues that come about in cocoa and chocolate markets are in fact not exclusive to cocoa or to chocolate. They would require much broader societal solutions in order to address. So our hope is that as you study the market, you will also be thinking about the way in which these studies can be used to try and answer some of those larger social questions and how people themselves can be a part of those solutions. And the final thing that I'd like to say is that, again, these studies were conducted in extraordinary circumstances. A pandemic that is continuing has been part of the entire process of doing this and has impacted in every way what has been possible. So this has required a lot of ingenuity and creativity on the part of all of the people involved in order to ensure that health and safety were protected as the studies were completed, and to address some of the very serious challenge related to travel bans, lack of vaccination, and more that delimited what was possible to do in conducting these studies. They've also been done as globally people are experiencing serious levels of exhaustion, of frustration, and of difficulty related to this pandemic. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that they've been done in conditions that are not okay and have managed to still approach a very serious level of sophistication and detail. Our hope is that you, as an audience for these studies, will share them, will use them to educate, to make informed decisions, to communicate with one another. In other words, to basically improve the way in which we talk about cocoa and chocolate supply chains. We hope that you will continue to ask questions. You'll see that we've put into the chat where further questions can be sent and addressed. And a best case scenario would be if you took this information and you brought it to life in your own work. We very much hope that that will be the case. We're enormously grateful to USDA, to IESC, and to Gaia Cacao for making all of this possible. And we invite you to be part of an ongoing conversation in bringing these studies to life. Thank you all for your time and your attention. The recording of this webinar will be available shortly after for those who you might like to share it with. And we encourage you to download these free open access studies and use them. Put them on your desks and make them part of your everyday engagement with this supply chain. Thank you, everyone. Stay healthy and take good care, and stay tuned for more.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, and bravo to all.
Thank you.